I'm rather fond of this scandal, if only because it reminds me of Fantasia. In 1908, the German Kaiser Wilhelm II was having an after-dinner lark with his generals when one of them, Dietrich von Hülsen-Hessler, collapsed and died of a heart attack. At the time of his death, General Hülsen-Hessler was dressed as a ballerina, the cause of his heart failure being ascribed to the exertions of dancing, linked below, which you might think embarrassing enough, were it not for General Hülsen-Hessler being involved in the cover-up of the Harden-Uhlenberg affair, which centred around journalist Maximilian Harden's claims that General von Moltke, not that one, this one was the military governor of Berlin, was having homosexual relations with Philipp Friedrich Alexander, Prince von Eulenburg and Hartfeld, Graf von Sandals, linked below. As we're in Germany, the land of Trump's grandfather, it would be rude not to at least mention in passing the interview the incoming president gave to Michael Gove of the Sunday Times and Kai Deichmann of Bild. As both newspapers have their websites behind paywalls, there is little point offering a link. Among other things, Donald Trump said that he had received a letter from Theresa May and that she had sent as a gift a copy of Winston Churchill's address to the American people shortly after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. In the letter, Mrs. May hoped the unity and fraternal association between the two countries was just as true today as it had ever been. As I was temporarily without my tinfoil hat, my spidey conspiracy sense began to tingle. Plus, what is the meaning of those Masonic hand signals between Gove and Trump? Link below. I notice the BBC can't stop being daft about Mr. Trump. Link below. Mr. Gove was interviewed on the Daily Politics by Joe Coburn, who I usually rather like. According to Ms. Coburn, an example of Trump's inconsistency is that before Christmas he threatened a nuclear arms race with the Russians, and yet in the interview with Mr. Gove he said he would meet Putin to discuss arms reductions. Now, let me see, how would that work? You'll have to imagine the sound effects. I'm using an old rotary phone. 3, 6, 2. It's a red phone. Oops, it's ringing. Hello? Is that Mr. Putin? Yeah, it's Donald Trump here. Do you want a war? No? Okay. How about we meet for peace talks? Fine. I'll have 'em bury a couple of fermented sharks. Oh, and Trump said that he would start off by trusting Mrs. Merkel and Mr. Putin, but it might not last long. Think about that statement for a moment. For some reason, Donald Trump places Anne Widdecombe's prettier younger sister on a par with that evil, dog-killing, gay-hating, bareback-riding, tyrannical dictator Putin. Either he is spending too much time reading Breitbart News, or it might have something to do with those telephone calls that the Americans were bugging. Link below. Remember, the bugging went on for 11 years until they were revealed, allegedly, by Snowden. Link below. And if you recall, there was gossip about how friendly Putin and Merkel were, and how Merkel spoke to Putin in Russian. To change the subject slightly, last week a graphic did the round that showed who pays in and who takes out of the EU. Link below. This was interpreted in a number of ways, depending upon whether the media outlet was pro or anti-EU. What interested me is that the country that gets the most out is Poland. To most people, Poland is synonymous with the Second World War. However, if you read history, the territory of Poland is rather fascinating. Rather than go into the details of the Treaty of Versailles, the various partitions, the 30 Years' War, etc., for the sake of caricature, we will call it the Ireland of Prussia and the Russian Empire, as rather like Ireland, for much of its history, Poland has been an idea as much as it has been a nation. The second country on that list is the Czech Republic, which, out of interest, contains the Sudetenland. Obviously, this is all simply a reflection of the economic state of those countries as they emerged from years of Soviet control, and indicates purely the level of investment needed to make them fully functioning members of the Eurovision Song Contest that is the EU. Clearly, Poland needs twice the support of Hungary and Romania combined. But hang on, what's Greece doing there? And Spain? And why does Bulgaria need such little support? And before we get bogged down in thinking about things we shouldn't, let's move on. I recommend watching The Poisoned Chalice, linked below, which is a 4-part documentary detailing Britain's tangled history with the EU. It offers an interesting perspective on the Brexit/Lexit vote and the positions adopted by the political parties, though my reason for recommending it is that perhaps the key moment that led to Britain's change of heart with regard to the EU was Helmut Kohl's efforts to prove just how un-German he was by inviting Mrs. Thatcher to his favourite local restaurant for a nice lunch of stuffed pig's stomach. As diplomatic incidents go, it perhaps doesn't rank with the dipsomaniac British Foreign Secretary George Brown, who, while attending a function in South America, partook of rather too much hospitality before turning to his neighbour and saying, "What a ravishing dress, my dear, you'll have to dance with me," to which his neighbour replied, "Mr. Brown, I am the Archbishop of Lima." But it certainly demonstrates the perils of Germans trying not to be Germans. Trump also criticised Mrs. Merkel for the migrant crisis, as would many Germans, if only Facebook would let them. There are numerous rumours doing the rounds involving Holocaust survivor George Soros and Mrs. Merkel. Some say he bribed her, others that he funded her political ambitions, and some that she was blackmailed. I vaguely recall a story about a dossier that came from the Open Borders Foundation, which was supposed to have influenced her decision. Whatever the truth, the German government has been linked to payments to the Clinton Foundation in October of last year, linked below, that allege a £4 million payment was made to plant trees in Africa. And clearly, Hillary Clinton, then still running for president, is also a fan of tree planting in Africa, as she is quoted as saying, "One of my favourites is Angela Merkel, because I think she's been an extraordinary, strong leader during difficult times in Europe, which has obvious implications for the rest of the world, and most particular, our country." The Express in their report is rather naughty because they include this picture, linked below, which shows Mrs. Merkel looking like Eddie Izzard as Hillary Clinton wins the 2005 Dildo of the Year award from the media control eunuchs. At which point it is only fair for Nigel Farage to give Mrs. Merkel a bit more of a kicking, linked below. One thing that is clear to anyone who has seen the migrant crime map, linked below, is that Mrs. Merkel has boxed herself into a corner, and no matter how much The Guardian, link below, tries to put lipstick on the pig, it is difficult to say Trump is spreading migrant scare stories when on that map a special category has had to be created because of the number of children being sexually assaulted in swimming pools. Where Trump is, I think, wrong is when he says, I do believe this, if European countries hadn't been forced to take in all those refugees, so many, with all the problems that entails, I think they wouldn't have had a Brexit. It probably would have worked out, but that was the final straw. This is the final straw that broke the camel's back. Because the history of Brexit is of successive governments promising a vote and then backing out for fear that they will lose. If anything, the British electorate suckered David Cameron into believing he could win, knowing that it was the only way that we could ever get a chance to vote out. But Trump is perhaps correct when he says of Mrs. Merkel, I think she made one very catastrophic mistake, and that was bringing in all these illegals, taking in all the people from wherever they came from, and nobody knows where they came from. So I think she made a catastrophic mistake, very big mistake. However, Angela is sticking to her story. Link below.